Here's the tough pill for healthcare founders. You can build a brilliant product, get FDA approval, even raise millions in funding, and still never make it into a hospital. Not because your innovation isn't good, but because you don't understand how hospitals actually adopt new solutions. Today, I'm joined by Tony Paquin, healthcare technology entrepreneur and a co-founder of iRemedy Healthcare. With more than 30 years in healthcare supply chain and hospital systems, Tony has helped countless companies navigate the complex path from innovation to real adoption. Healthcare entrepreneurs, are you ready to rewrite the rules for your business so you can have more time off, a great team, and more income while creating a positive social impact? Then you are in the right place. Welcome to The Provider's Edge. I'm your host, Sabrina Runbeck. I'm a provider, an international peak performance keynote speaker, and a best-selling author. Let's open the gateway to profitability for you today. My guests and I help healthcare entrepreneurs and startup founders like you break through barriers so you can control your business, control your life, and control your future. This is your defining moment to be a disruptor in healthcare. We're so honored to have Tony here with us. He is a healthcare technology entrepreneur and supply chain expert with more than 3 decades of experience across a healthcare, logistic, and regulatory market. He is the co-founder and chairman of CEO of iRemedy Healthcare, an AI-driven procurement platform supporting providers nationwide, and also all the international product that actually need to get into the US healthcare system. Tony has founded multiple public and private companies, hosts US patents in AI and automation, and testified before the US Senate Special Committee on Aging on Medical Supply Chain Risks. He is the author of The End of Us and the host of the Supply Side Podcast. We're so excited. Thank you, Tony, for joining us and really enlightening us. We all know getting into a health system is tough, and most people just don't even know who to talk to, how to talk to, and even have a decent enough product that is actually something the hospital system would like. And then you guys is that bridge between the medical devices, drugs, and medical supply. How did you figure out this is the type of problem you wanted to solve in the healthcare space?
Sure, I'd be happy to jump into that. And Sabrina, thank you for having me on your podcast. We're, very excited about what you do and all the value you bring to the market. I think it's so important. I'm a big believer in innovation. So I love the idea of innovating and people, having new ideas and bringing new products to market. I think that, in fact, I often tell people now's the time to be optimistic about healthcare. And it's a little contrary because a lot of people worry about, the high cost of healthcare and all the problems we face as a society. But really, it's a time to be optimistic because of all the innovation that's taking place. In my particular situation, if you go back a number of years, we were consulting with hospitals on building retail businesses. And we had worked at 600 hospital locations, which is a lot, pretty much touched on all the major systems out there. We held annual conferences. I wrote a book at that time. And we got involved with building pharmacies owned by the hospital. So they would have a outpatient kind of discharge pharmacy strategy. We really were the early adopters of that concept. So we built these pharmacies and we helped the hospitals get their purchasing plans going on, you got to buy all the drugs and go through that process. And we got a feeling for how inefficient and difficult that distribution process was. And so we decided, hey, this is a place where we could innovate and bring a lot more value into the supply chain. So that's really what started us on our journey that became iRemedy Healthcare years later.
Yeah, I feel like everybody who has been entrenched into doing what you do, and that's when the innovation side of you start get going, right? The gears are running. It's like, what can I fix that I'm already doing that is not convenient? I can actually help a lot more people, right? I always talk about this one to many effect. If we kind of stuck in what we're doing, this is the only thing we can accept. But many of us just want to say, hey, we can do better, right? You can help not only for anything that you being involved with, the things that you're really passionate about, getting into the healthcare system, and now you're helping multiple people, right? You guys being around for a while, how many products, services, and across how many different health systems you guys are all tapped into now?
Yeah, well, over the years, thousands of healthcare providers, both hospitals, also surgical centers, medical clinics. I'd say we touch on most of the major hospital systems out there in one form or another, or we have over the years. In terms of products, we get into really high volume of numbers of products just because we deal with things like drugs or medical supplies, so we could carry, at times we've had as many as several 100,000 products in our catalog. And that's a little bit of where the innovation in artificial intelligence comes into play. Is on the one hand, it's so complicated, for a hospital to manage all of these, SKUs, all these various products. And they want to do that, they need to do it more efficiently, and they need to modernize. And that dilemma right there is the kind of thing that I think a lot of newer companies face. Is the hospitals, they want to innovate. They need to do new things. They can't keep operating the way they are now and think that it's going to work out, because it's not going to work out. There's a lot of bankruptcy, a lot of failure, a lot of problems, unfortunately, in the hospital market. So they have to innovate, but at the same time, they can only deal like with proven ideas, right? So they got the other problem of, patients and patient safety and protocol and all the other kind of bureaucratic things that they struggle with. So we were very focused on that. And our experience has gone everywhere from routine, drugs and needles and syringes and all the things that you're familiar with. But then we'll start working with a startup manufacturer that is, innovating on some IV product or on some, something used in joint replacement surgery or some sort of new surgical tool or, whatever the case might be. We see a lot of that. It's a very active space. I think it's cool. I love working with those companies. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think that's why we feel so much more excited about these things, right? You're constantly in the forefront of seeing what's new, what's next. And then you get excited about, like, oh, I can totally see this is happening in this sector because you guys are already tapped into those different sector of healthcare innovation side and knowing how to get them into the system. And right before we got live, we were just talking about my experience at Vibe, how we talked to like 30 different startups and majority of them wanted to be health system. But when I asked them, okay, but who's actually the person signed the contract to get you into the door? Who do you actually talk to? Is that really the procurement side? Is the CFO? What is a department chair? They don't really get it, right? Like they just like almost like a throwing spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks. And instead, they should be talking to people like yourself, especially if they're in those three category of drugs, medical device, and supply chain. Now, I also wondering, because we know drug development is such a long way, right? At what point is best to start having conversation with you guys?
Yeah, well, now for us, we get involved pretty late in the process. So we're pretty involved when a product is either, FDA approved or near FDA approval, when they're starting to strategize what you were just describing, which is just super critical. And that is, well, how are you really going to bring this into the market? And it's a shame because sometimes you have these brilliant inventors, and sometimes they're doctors or nurses or other clinicians or scientists or just people with a good idea. But they're not necessarily good at the other part, which is figuring out the sales part of the experience. And what we encourage when we come across that, or when I talk to those companies, I really encourage them to connect up with a healthcare provider partner as soon as they can. And you even catch with me. I'll say, yeah, the hospitals. Well, what I really mean are the integrated delivery networks or the hospital systems. And today, a hospital or healthcare system, they got a hospital. Well, they actually have multiple hospitals. They'll have urgent care centers. They'll have retail clinics. They'll have pharmacy. They probably have an infusion center. They'll have all these other businesses really that they own. Certainly clinics. They'll own medical practices. They'll, all these different things. And you want to get in there and work with somebody who uses your kind of product and try and gain some credibility with that within that system. There's kind of like a top-down strategy and a bottom-up strategy, right? So the way I look at it is, on the one hand, you get because some of these products are like physician choice products, right? If you have a new, type of needle or something, or a new scalpel, it's going to be very important that the surgeon is bought into that. 'Cause the hospital, no matter how great it is, if the surgeon's not on board, it's not going to go anywhere. So, these physician choice products or clinical driven products. So on the one hand, you need that buy-in. Now, if you've got a product that's going to save the healthcare system money, right? Well, then you go right to the CFO. Because the CFO today, and I believe the CFOs today are getting increasingly more powerful because they must improve their financial performance. It's no longer like, I wish we could maybe do a little better. It's like, we need to do better or we're not going to survive. So, they are very open to legitimate, proven ideas that, improve operations or, whatever it is that brings some efficiency into this very complicated world that they live in. Now, the other part are, people like me, and what we do is we help with sort of the infrastructure part, because at the end of the day, you have to deal with the procurement people. You have to have a way for the order to process and for the logistics to occur. And yeah, you may have security issues, DSCSA, or you might have cold chain, or there's HIPAA involved. I mean, there could be all kinds of rules that govern how that product is going to move. So even though you're small, you might need reasonably sophisticated, logistics capability. As much as that hospital might love your idea and want to work with you, it has to be easy for them to do. Otherwise, they just can't. There's too much hassle. I don't know how else to say it, but it's just too much hassle. They won't do it. They're just too busy. You know, they're typically understaffed and overworked. It's kind of the rule in healthcare, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's definitely an operational thing that you guys are
Yeah.
helping. And no matter what, businesses are built by people, and people tend to be people and get overwhelmed. And because we have a human nature, it's like, oh, let me just serve, let me just do more. And then people tend to be juggling five different things at the same
Mm.
time. So if you don't have a true workflow to optimize the delivery of care or whatever you promised, then the health system specifically gonna look at these smaller companies as you don't have what it takes, right? I believe in your product, I believe in your service, but if you don't really have enough effective way to deliver what you thought out to do, then the financial department is not going to like you, right? Because they have a big bill to pay you and you're not saving them
Yeah.
money. And from the other side of, if you have a specific thing, I remember back in the day, I just really like this very fine pickup, right? Because I work in cardiothoracic surgery. And then, so it's like we are very tiny loops, right? Operating. So I wanted this pair of blue
Right.
pickup. And I
Exactly.
saw it at, right? Like I saw at one of the STS conference. I told the rep, I'm like, go back to your and then tell them that I want
Yes, exactly.
right?
That's what I'm
And
talking
then somehow it showed up in my
about.
tray, right?
I tell you, I think that this is to me where the real value of hospital venture funds come into. It's, you can get a little investment out of them. That's great. But what you're really getting is that sort of sponsorship. And I think that's got massive value, or even a large medical practice, because the large medical practices, private equity deals, they're getting to be pretty big. They're like mini healthcare systems now. Same thing with surgery centers. And if you got, a partner at that level on one of these products, you're going to have that credibility. And then you need a partner like ours, frankly, that can, we're in the system, right? So we, for example, I probably have explained to you, but we have a strategic partnership with UPS Healthcare. They're really the largest healthcare logistics company in the world. But what that allows us to do is move product, and we run their incubator program, by the way. So they are very interested in small startup businesses because those businesses may become big at some point. And that comes to us. We run all of that for them. So even if you're really small, like maybe you only ship, 20 things a month, you still have to do it in a way that's compliant. Like you're describing a surgical tool, well, it has to be sterile and it has to be tracked and there has to be an ability to recall. The hospital's going to look for those things because, they have their requirements that they have to maintain in that big complex business. So, yeah, I think that's the challenge. But if you can get a partnership with a large healthcare provider, a doctor, or a hospital, I think you're way ahead of the game as compared to, many others that are out there. And the other thing I found is I've sold into these healthcare systems over the years. Nobody wants to be first and nobody wants to be last, right? So you got to just get that first client or two. Like, you don't need to go out and sell the world. Get a good hospital healthcare system that likes your product. Because, like you used the example, you met that rep, at the show, and then you were like his sponsor. You helped get that deal done, right? Get a little deal like that, get a deal done, service it like crazy, do an amazing job for them so they love you. And then you're good then. You can take that and they become your reference and you can take that to the next system and the next system. And before you know it, people will, follow and get on board.
Yeah, it's definitely a lesson to learn is finding a champion is for sure is critical, especially it's a product that is directly impacting the clinicians, the nurses, whoever is actually there to help you champion from bottom up, right? And then it's also the pinpoint that we always ask people, what exactly are you
Yeah.
fixing, right? Your problem that you're solving should not be an annoying problem. It should be like a
Yeah.
carotid is bleeding, now you needed to have surgery, right? And your solution is vascular surgery. Yay, we're here. Like, let's close this, right? Stop the bleeding. And so if you're not truly have that bleeding out
Yeah.
problem
I'm
or
really
a
compelling.
surgical closure,
Yeah,
then
I
people's
hear
gonna
you.
look at,
Yeah.
yeah, very visual thing, right? Then it's like, okay, it's
Yeah.
annoying thing that you're solving. It sounds good, right? Oh, this software can really help your nurse track better that. Then we're like, okay, so what? Right? Like, what is it that you really help us to cut down? Are you improving our patient satisfaction so the quality is better? We get more reimbursement? What is it that you actually do, right? And not just this high fluff emotional goal. You might get the initial buy-in from people from the emotional side, but you have to have something physically tangible to prove the point for people to say yes. And that, I think, it goes both ways, right? From both the individual champions seeing what's possible, but also start from the top down. The people who are actually signing and paying, they need to have a proof of point. And when you get to a innovation side, like Tony is saying, get to a venture or health system like Tony's that has an incubator plus a supply chain that can actually
Right.
deploy what you have, right? And also is things like we have people who are in different health systems,
Exactly.
right? We know what their priority or wish lists are. If you don't know that, then you can pitch all these systems. They're not going to respond to you because they are still only care about their top few on the wish list versus you should be going to somewhere else and not feeling like, oh, people are not getting back to us. I can't get my pilot, blah, 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 right? It's all about that intentional match on where things need to go, and then keep going at what Tony suggested, maybe a smaller community hospital. It doesn't have to be something has to break into this hospital with 5 or 10 different branches. You don't have to be
Right.
that ambitious. Just
That's right.
prove the point for that
That's right. Get a
very first
win.
pilot.
I think the other point that you're making is be a part of an ecosystem. So, like you've got your network and your organization, and it's much more efficient. Like I probably have in our group, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 companies that would be what you would call incubators, kind of startup. Well, the advantage is when we're with a healthcare system, we can go, oh, by the way, do you have this problem? We have this other client. Like we can in essence sort of represent 20 deals at once. And we're always, as we're all working and networking, we're kind of networking on behalf of our customers, of course, because the more they sell, the more we service them, right? So I think if you can be part of a network like that, and there's a lot of them. There's companies like mine, there's organizations like yours, there's venture capital groups, there's these funding partners. There's different ways to do it. But I think that's a big advantage is that security. And a little bit what you're describing, I've had some people come to me with great ideas, and I can tell they've invested a lot of money in it. And we're sort of looking at them, but we're kind of going, they're pretty naive about the world they're getting into. They just don't know reimbursement rules or, some technical business issue that was going to have a real effect on them. If they were part of a group of some sort, they would be more likely to pick up that information and probably save themselves a lot of pain and suffering and time and money. I think they still have a great idea and it can, bring value. You're talking about the bleeding out idea. I would just say it has to be compelling because you're asking people to make a change. And the nature of healthcare operations is not to make a lot of change because with change, there's risk. So, they don't change a lot. So you got
Exactly.
to have a reason to your point, like, hey, this is a great clinical solution. Somebody's not going to bleed out. This is a great idea. People are going to go, wow, that's amazing. Or you go, hey, if you do this, your revenues are going to go up 20% and you're going to get better clinical outcomes. Well, that's a compelling reason. But you got to have that, it's the big
Correct.
idea. You got to have a big idea.
Right? Like we always say, keep things simple, right? If it's the most simple sense, is there urgency? Is there why it has to be done? And it has to be done this way, right? Sometimes the people can offer multiple of similar solution, but it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be done a certain way. But maybe your way, it is going to be a cost saver, or the things that you use for these supplies is a lot cheaper than something else, right? We've seen that too, right? Like a telescope, it's not a heavy metal, therefore it's off the shelf, it's cheaper than people who has a role in the whole imaging arm, right? So you need to define in the convenience, is it easier, how is it better, right? But making things a lot more clear. Like we always say, sixth grader need to understand. If you overcomplicate this, even though we're all in healthcare, we're not going to pay attention. So I know we have a lot to talk about. This is very exciting. There's both on the innovation side, on the supply chain, on how to really expand yourself into the health system. So Tony, what's the best way for people to connect with you guys when they have a ready product to go get plugged
Yeah,
into these
absolutely.
health systems?
So, we're pretty active. We're on social media, as you would imagine, but the simplest way to contact me is Tony at iRemedy.com, IREMDY.com, iRemedy.com, or go to our website, iRemedy.com, and you'll have contact information there. We're always interested in having conversations and finding, new opportunities to work with. As I mentioned at the beginning of our talk, I'm a big, believer and passionately want to support innovation and emerging companies. So anything that we can do to help, I'm there to help.
Perfect. Yes, it's all about tapping into these ecosystems. You're in medical device supply chain drug development. go contact Tony. If you expand into the other sectors, more systems, more private sectors, investment sectors, contact us, right? We're all here to collectively help you guys to grow into the phase that you are. And the more resources you have, not necessarily to get all of them, right? It's be intentional with your conversation with these experts who wanted to support you. So we're so glad for Tony to be here with us. Until next time. Thank you for listening. Remember, the positive change we're seeking starts right here with me and you. If you are a fan of the show, or if you are just having struggles or success that you're either experienced in the past or are experiencing now in the healthcare industry, these matter to all of us. I want to hear from you. Visit SabrinaRunbeck.com/connect and send me a direct message. Talk soon.